Good evening, all, and welcome to Kal-bardr's Corner for this episode of This Just In, a show that we shouldn't need, but for now, we're here. We're focusing on transparency and what is happening in the known world. I am Baron Kal-bardr Gellir, and for this show, I am joined by Duchess Elina of Buckingham. Good evening, Grace.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm pretty good actually. I've got my my lovely drink here. Just Lady Kisa just finished up a show on Coach's Corner, so my seat is nice and warm for me. It was kind of nice.
Stay hydrated.
Right, there you go. There might be whiskey in that. I have too much. I have Gulf Wars left over still, so I'm trying to drain down the mixed drink. So, Your Grace, if you will introduce yourself to the audience, let us know who you are and why you're awesome.
Sure. Well, I don't know about awesome, but we'll go for that. So, other people have had other adjectives for me. My name is Duchess Elina of Buckingham. I'd tell you that there's no G, but then you're going to say, yes, your race. It's Elina of Buckingham, and I've lived...
My apologies, Your Grace. My apologies.
You can tell this is a reoccurring problem.
Right.
And I've lived in a variety of kingdoms for a number of years: Trimaris, Meridies, Caid, West, Antir, Middle for quite some time, and I'm currently living in Atlantia. My county and my laurel were from Trimaris. My pelican was from the west. My duchy from the west. My knighthood was from the Midwell. So significant participation in a variety of kingdoms, and probably mumble many years in the society. So I've actually gotten a chance to watch the society grow up. I was also the autocrat for 50 year, which was literally in our backyard. It was a lot of fun. Lots of work, a lot of fun.
Right.
So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah. We will not go into your mumble years of service to the society, but thank you for that. And yeah, you were actually recommended to me by a fellow mid-realmer, so
Cool.
who fangirled a little at you and said you're an awesome person and said I should talk to you. So I'm glad to have you on.
It's good to meet you.
So for those watching, this is a new series to Kal-bardr's Corner. Started last couple weeks ago with Baron Kevin on the Wistrick-Butler issues. We're continuing the theme of transparency in the SCA. And tonight's show is about transparency, in fact. So before we get into that, we do want to toss this up. Views and opinions expressed here are those of the participants and do not reflect any official policy or position of SCA Incorporated or our kingdoms or baronies. Just like to cover that. So these are our opinions. If you have problems with us, please write to us, message Kal-bardr's Corner. We're going to cover the topic we know, what data we have available to us tonight, and what we can see. We will express opinions, but they will revolve around our thoughts around the data. If there's something we say that is wrong or something that we don't have, please reach out and let me know. Please send me an email, and we'll do a follow-up show if more comes to light or as more comes to light. So tonight's show is, and it's mislabeled a little bit, but I put it up there because that was the sort of start of conversation with FOIA requests and transparency. So FOIA, for those who don't know, is Freedom of Information Act, which in this case doesn't actually apply because the SCA is not a government organization. Her Grace did assault me with that early on in our conversation. But I thought the topic worked, made it a little easier.
So it makes it easier to understand. So we'll just gloss over that one.
So that's the idea. But the idea is there are some things that do apply to us as a 501c3 and as a charity nonprofit organization and in our bylaws that are very similar to the Freedom of Information Act that the government falls under. So I am going to share out a document that we're going to be working off of. This is from Iselda, who sort of started this. This is all public knowledge. It's all public on their Facebook. So I'm not sharing any secrets here. That Google Doc is in both the Facebook and YouTube there. And if you've got any questions during the show, please pop them in over yonder or down there, wherever you're watching at. And just, hey, let us know you're watching. I see Ducky and Joe out there and folks hanging out. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. So, Your Grace, I want to start with you. Just sort of give me what you know of this topic, what your thoughts are initially before we dive into the details here.
All right. When the request was first posted, I looked at it and went, well, that's not going to go the way you think it is. It's like, I know what you want, and I completely sympathize with wanting it, right, and it's not going to go the way you think it should. And that's because I have been an investigator for the government. I have been an investigator for, let me rephrase that, for my job in the Army, for my job currently, for I've even been an investigator for the board of directors for the president of the society. So I'm very familiar with what an investigator has to go through and what they do, and why the investigator's notes and why the investigator's information isn't shared. It's not shared. It was interesting that somebody had said, well, we won't need the SEA to start acting more like a real corporation. We're a multi-million-dollar international organization. We should be acting like it. And it was like, we are. No corporation shares their internal investigation notes ever. And so we're, as the SCA, we are mimicking what real world best practice is in not sharing that information. Now, the downside of that is that we get wrapped up in the half of the story that we know, and we want to know the other half. We want to know this is injustice. This doesn't make sense. We want to make sense of it, particularly if it involves something we're slightly familiar with. So I understand the need to want more. I also understand why a corporation can't share it, and not just won't, but can't. As an investigator, one of the hardest things, the hardest thing you do as an investigator is not prescribe motive to a particular action. I can report the fact, but I'm not allowed to give it motive. And unfortunately, a lot of people will not only prescribe a motive for a particular act, they'll describe the factual act, then they're going to give it a motive, and then they're going to condemn the person for the motive they gave them.
Right. So and in this case, you're covering the who, the what, and the where, but not the why.
Right. I can't, unless they flat out tell me I did this because, I cannot prescribe the why. And then I have to compare other people's facts, not their, not an assumed why. And setting aside the assumption is always the hardest part, always the hardest part, particularly when you have some version of history with some of the characters. Okay, so-and-so did this because they're an asshole and they wanted to stir muck. Okay, you don't know that. So-and-so did this. That's the only fact you can offer.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, when the request first came out, I looked at it and went, that's not going to yield the information you want, because the information you really want is the investigation, the investigator's notes. What were the other facts that the investigator found? And they can't share that.
Right.
They can't. And people say, well, why? Well, there's lawsuits. There's an expectation of privacy. There's all sorts of stuff for why you don't want to share that.
So I think that's really where, so I'll speak to the other side of this. So it's really interesting hearing your thoughts as an investigator and someone who's on the outside of this as the general public, right? So I like this sort of play here. It's tough for us to see and hear that and not know. So in this case, for those who read, so this is all about the Kal-bardr thing, but it's about the requests for information, not about the thing. So we're going to cover the request for information side.
Right.
So in this case, we want to know more about what happened. We know a lot of Wistrick's side, and we know some of the public rumors from other people who are there, but we don't know what actually happened outside of the reports. And seeing what I've saw, and Kevin and I covered this pretty extensively, we've seen a lot of data from Wistrick and others, right?
Sure.
Which we would assume and can hope that were provided to the investigators. What we're seeing doesn't match with the rulings that came down from the bod necessarily. Now, it may, and you and I talked a little bit before the show, that maybe what he did, what happened, is correct with the punishment. Those things may match, right? But there's some disconnect on the data there that they used to make that decision.
Right.
And this is an example of a problem, right? We're using this right now as the obvious hot button, but it's not the only time this has happened.
Right.
We can come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of times.
Dozens. Yeah.
Right. That this exact thing has happened over the years in 57 years of society, that we don't have all the data, and it's hard for us to see our friends hurt, right? I think that's where the emotion comes in without that data.
Right.
But also I can understand you as investigators can't release that, and the bod can't release that as investigators because of lawsuits. And I'm going to air quote lawsuits.
More than that.
The whole thing.
More than that. So let's put the lawsuit problem aside. Well, all right, let's go back one more step. communication is always understood based on where the person is when they receive that communication.
Okay.
Okay. And it's a long way of saying, have you ever seen the movie Intersection?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's an accident in the middle of the intersection, and there's the stories of 4 different people, and they all interpret the accident differently because of what happened, in the previous 24 hours to that person.
Right.
So how you interpret something is different based on where you are coming from. If I believe that the board is an evil cabal that is nepotistic, that is just a horrible entity that is out to screw everybody, I'm going to interpret it as in a particular light. Okay, they're hiding something from me. Okay, if on the other hand I start with the bod as these are my fellow SCA patrons who go to events with me, who I might wind up sitting down drinking a beer with them. They're good people, etc. And they've made this decision. You might look at the thing as like, the facts I know are wonky, but these are good people. There must be something I'm missing.
Right.
Okay. So there's literally you start with different premises and come to different conclusions because of it. And that's why you can't ascribe motive, okay, because you're not in that other person's shoes. So
and I can sit here and look at that board and see people like Kal-bardr and Graf, or people who I know and trust, and I would trust with my life. And I'm like, and they know Wistrick, they know the issues, they know sort of the people. So I'm like, something's up, and that's where I think it's harder.
There's something that's not here.
Me. There's something I'm missing.
Right. So let's put aside the lawsuit, and I can explain how you are inevitably going to get into a lawsuit. And in all of the examples I'll use, I am going to strip names, but I'm going to give you real world examples.
Sure.
Okay. Actually, I can give you real world SCA examples. Okay.
Excellent.
Of previous investigations. Okay.
Right.
And the thing that you want to understand here is that not sharing information is a requirement on all sides. The person who has been sanctioned, I'm not going to tell all the dirt I found out about him.
Right.
Okay. The person who gave me information as an investigator did so in confidence. I can tell you this. Gosh, it really pains me, hurts me to tell you this. I'm so embarrassed that X happened. Okay. I'm not going to take what they say on face value. I'm going to go verify it someplace else. Okay. So the idea, well, they could just be lying to me. Could, but I'm going to go check. Okay. And if I can't verify it, I can't put
trust
it in
and verify.
Right. And if I can't verify it, then I can't actually use it as evidence in the investigation. But they've told me something in confidence. They might have told me something that was painfully embarrassing to them. They might be outing a bad actor. Mm-hmm. So there's Duke Hansy, okay? Duke Hansy, okay? And some people, and not his real name.
That is different than Duke Hansa from the West.
No, Duke Hansa. Duke Hansa's my bro. Okay.
I love me some Hans, not him.
No, Duke Hansa is actually our step squire.
That tracks.
Okay. So Duke Hansy here is known to fondle young ladies against their will or before they know about it. He hasn't done anything that rises to the level of having the person arrested, but he's a creep. Okay. Complaint gets made about him and an investigation ensues. They bring in an investigator like me, and I am there to investigate and ask people, hey, did Duke Hansy fondle you? That's a private conversation.
Right.
And that person is going to open up, more likely going to open up because it's a confidential conversation. And they say, yeah, not only did Duke Hansy, get handsy with me, but it fondled my sister.
Right.
Can we go talk to your sister? Right? Can we go talk to the other people? And they'll give you information about Duke Hansy, okay, that never rise to the level of a criminal act for prosecution, but
it's anecdotal, not
it's anecdotal.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now I've got a body of evidence against Duke Hansy. Okay. Duke Hansy gets a slap on the wrist because there's no criminal activity going on here. Okay. But he's told, dude, you can't be in a position of authority. You can't be holding an office. In one particular case, we're going to give you a guardian at every event.
Oh, wow.
Okay? You're going to have watchdogs. okay, at events. And all this is, the end result of it. Imagine if Duke Hansey could petition the board for the investigator's notes on all the ladies who complained and guys who complained about him.
Yeah, no,
what happens
and I
then?
think, and I've talked to people about this. I think we can all agree. I'll speak for everyone out there in the world here. That there is a limit, right? There's a limit on what should and could be released by the bod, by the PR's bill, right. and that those notes and the accusers, sure, that makes complete sense to me as a logical human being to not release that. I think where this particular incident and others like it have blurred that line for me is where it turns into none of this was that, right? We can talk about all the past incidents between these two individuals, but this wasn't that. This was an issue on the field that involved all of our safety. And I don't know that it was necessarily in the realm of that. Now, there may be in those notes, some of those things could happen. If as the investigator, they went to people and said, hey, is Wistrick this and this and this and this? And they went, yeah, sure. Here's things he did, right? And that may be a case, and that's fine. I think maybe there's a balance to be achieved. Come back to that in a
second, because that's actually important.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. What was that?
Come back to that in a second, because I'll finish your thought. We'll come back to that in a second, because it's important.
Because I think that's one part of it. I think the other part, as me as a fighter, right? I want to know the details of the Marshall problem that happened, right? Because he there's a penalty that was assessed because of that. I want to know the other side of it so that I can make a safety decision for me with him and other marshals involved, frankly, because it wasn't just him. There's other marshals involved in this conversation. So I think, and Jerusha brings up, this is a safety issue, right? So I think that's where that line becomes blurry for me.
Right. In this particular case, there was never a question that he had an authorization. The question was whether or not he had the paperwork for the authorization, and was the paperwork valid? There were plenty of people there who said, yeah, he's authorized, been authorized for months, been fighting rapier for months. There was never a question about whether or not he was safe on the field. So that was one of those things that was like, okay, when this came to the court of public opinion, that got spun up. Oh my God, this is a safety issue and we're not following our safety rules. Nope, the safety rules were followed. And there were people there that knew that. And in fact, there's a question as to whether or not Wistrick actually knew it. So is
there a way to release documents or release more of a statement from the board that talks about that without incriminating others or whatever?
Right. So here's the problem with that is if I release some documents, but not others, if I release some investigation notes, but not others, then you've got to have a person to decide this one gets released and this one doesn't.
Right.
How unfair is that going to look?
Sure.
How amazingly, and now this person can be, the person who's deciding can be accused of impropriety or not being consistent in the rules, and a variety of other things of, oh, this person is only releasing the information that my hero looked bad. Okay, so it's an all or nothing. Either the rules apply to everybody or they don't apply to anybody. And in this particular case, because there are also legal ramifications to something, suppose I've got information that I don't want to use this as an example, but I have to. So suppose there was information in this investigation that made Wistrick look bad. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just assume it's there. I'm not saying it is.
Yeah,
let's assume it's there. He looks bad. And it calls into question his integrity. It calls into question a variety of things. And now I've got the flame war about, oh, his integrity is in question. He's a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. And that's not doing him any good either. Mm. So in this particular case, or in other cases, not releasing additional information is actually protecting the person who's bitching about lack of information. Sure. There have been, let's see, there was a question here. It also affects the game. Okay. I'm sorry, I was just reading it.
Yeah. Also, both Ducky and Jerusha out there, and they're right. A lot of this conversation, this is a big deal currently, and this is a conversation that they and I have had, and that Bernazar and I have had. This is an issue because it affects two cis het white dudes, right? This is a big deal right now. And to speak to those out there, we're using this as an example of a bigger problem. I spoke to Zara about this and actually invited her on this show. And her and I will be doing a separate DEI ongoing efforts conversation because she didn't want to show bias in this. And I think there's some of the bias
and
there.
for all good reasons. For all good reasons.
Right.
She has a reputation to protect of being hip deep in this particular advocacy. And I completely get it. I 100%, which is probably why they sent you off to me.
So I think the issue, and I want to actually pull some stuff out. So I linked to Zelda things out. I want to pull some things out and talk about some of these points here, because you're right. I think the point you made is correct, and me as a logical human being can agree with you. How can we trust those people, right? Again, I trust Kal-bardr, I trust Graf Ulrich. I don't trust the SCA board of directors, right? As a whole, as a faceless entity, I trust individual people. And this is the same as me going, I don't trust the chivalry. I trust you as a knight. I don't trust the chivalry as a whole, right? It's the same sort of concept.
Right.
So there's a thing here, and I'm quoting this from the SCA governing documents. Let me put it into the chat so everybody can see what I'm seeing here. Here we go. So any communication with the board is considered public unless the author stipulates at the time of writing that the document is considered to be confidential. So this to me stood out as where does that line get drawn? Is everything is as an investigator or just as emails to the board? Like if I send an email to the board and I don't mark it confidential, it technically by their own governing documents should be public. These are public a little loosely here, but like, am I reading that wrong? How do we look at it from that side?
I might argue that, if it was a communication with the board that wasn't otherwise specified to be confidential. However, everything associated to an investigation is confidential. It even says so in the investigator's manual. It says so in the Seneschal's handbook. Okay. It says the board says we as the board agree that everything in this group of communications right here is confidential. Whether or not they mark it. I honestly cannot remember whether or not I had to put my in fact, I know that I didn't put confidential in the subject line of my investigation communications, but it was understood this is confidential, and that's why people would talk to the investigator.
Sure.
Is because they weren't going to be caught up as a whistleblower. Okay, so the problem that a lot of people will say is, well, we need to see these No, you want to see these communications, and we want it because we want to defend our friends, right. And that's a noble thing. Okay, to want to defend our friends. You could get the same information by doing the investigation that the investigator did, by going and asking the clerk of the court, hey, did Baldar actually have the authorization 3 months before Gulf Wars, like some people have said? Go talk to not the Earl Marshal of Trimaris involved, but a previous Earl Marshal of Trimaris, and say, hey, did he have the authority to do this? Yeah. So right, why does it say it in Kapoor? Because last I checked, this was the ultimate governing. Because in Kapoor, it also says they're allowed to adopt additional rights or additional documents. That's why it does say it, but it's a nested.
I think, and you mentioned it, and it's something that I'm unfamiliar with that I'm going to go dig up. And if those watching want to go dig for me, the Seneschal's handbook and the investigator's handbook, I think maybe 2 places that, and my wife is screaming.
In section 2, it specifically says all information of the investigator is confidential and property of SCA Inc.
Right. And I think the SCA has an issue with document control and where their documents line up, and that's a whole separate issue than this.
Any corporation does.
The corporation has issues with that.
Every corporation does.
And I think that's a problem that we as non-members or as non-SCA paid people here, as the general populace, can look at it and go, this is an issue, but there's a lot there. So if that says that, cool. I will trust that for this moment because I don't have time. I can't go look it up.
I can probably find it fast enough for you. But
if you want to look that up, someone out there can.
But it's literally paragraph 2, section 2 of the investigator's handbook, which you'll find in the Seneschal's section of corporate documents. Anyway, I've linked it to other people. But anyway, so let's take an entirely different example. Let's look at somebody who literally everything that's being said about the board in the Wistrich case was said in this case. And they're saying, oh my goodness, the board is nepotistic. They're out to get it. This is all a personal thing. They're protecting this. They're protecting the seneschal who made a complaint about it. This guy is inappropriately been R&D'd for things that aren't his fault. And he puts up a huge stink. It literally could have been parallel, just rip out one name, put in the other.
Right.
The actual acts were different. Okay. And in reality, what you don't know is the guy is having a trial for inappropriate touching of minors.
Right.
Okay. And the board can't say anything because I can't slander this individual. If I release any of my notes, that now becomes slander. And it'll be a frivolous lawsuit, but the person will sue saying, hey, they've told me, they've said that I'm a child molester. Now that hasn't been proven in a court of law. So he's going to take it to a court and say, they're calling me a child molester. That damages my reputation. And therefore I'm suing the SCA. It's a frivolous lawsuit. It will still cost the SCA $50,000.
Right.
Even if they will settle out of court, because it will only cost them $50,000 settling out of court. It will cost them $250,000 if they take it to court and have to reproduce everything that the investigator did.
Yeah, and that's not fun. I think that's
it's not conducive to staying afloat.
Right.
Okay. So there's another reason for why we don't do it. It protects, the corporate entity itself.
Right.
Right.
Which, and anybody who's ever worked in any corporate environment knows HR is not for the people, HR is for the company. And
right.
This is a similar mentality. They're protecting SCA Incorporated.
Right.
They're not protecting us as people.
Right.
Often we hope those things will align. The protecting
Correct.
the SCA will protect us.
Right.
We also can know that they don't always. Right. Or some of us have opinions that they don't.
We'd love the missing information.
Mm.
We'd love it. But it's something we want. It is not something we are entitled to. And if you really, really want it, go do the investigation.
Right.
Go call the clerk of the roster in Trimaris. Go talk to one of the marshals. But that's not what people are asking for. They're asking for, hey, hand that to me on a silver platter. Give me that information. And I can appreciate wanting it because you want to defend a friend, and that is a noble thing. Okay?
And Chris brings up to me, it's about consistency and missing information called into question. Other similar situations have vastly different results, and you're right. So I think, and that's where I fall into this is I don't necessarily want to know the details of the investigation, right? And because I can see. You made a great point of not picking and choosing. I think that's a good point. If all investigations are confidential, cool, right? What I would like to see done differently, and this is where I think the board could be more consistent,
mm-hmm.
is in providing a statement about the decision they make a little more publicly, right? I think the issue that I have is having to go dig for their details and dig for their decisions, right? Because their decisions that they make in Milpitas, California, don't affect anybody else, but they do. They affect all of us. They affect the SCA as a whole.
So in reality, board members are from all over the
Correct.
SCA. They're from all kingdoms. They
Agreed.
literally go to the
Considering
event.
Two of them are in Meridias, I agree with you.
There's several of them in Meridias.
I'm putting Milpitas as that's where the problem is over there, right? It's not.
But the question is transparency. How can we be more transparent? How can we be more transparent about information without walking the line of impending personal lawsuits or slandering someone who may or may not deserve it? So how can we do that? Now, we know that it's best practice in corporations not to release investigators' notes. There's a reason for it. There's legal reasons, there's personal reasons, there's victims' rights reasons, there's all sorts of reasons for that. But what can we do to be more transparent?
Right.
So that's really the question that I would throw out to people who says, you demand more transparency of the board. Great. I agree. Hallelujah. What do you want?
Right.
And more transparency is not an actionable item.
Right.
What is an actionable item? Right? I want board meetings to rotate kingdoms. Great. We do that.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't always. We do now because people ask for more transparency. Great. Is it? I want board meetings, except for the sticky private parts or the confidential parts. I want them to be in public. Great. We do that. Okay. I want published meeting notes. Yep. Okay. We can do that. What actionable items do we want that would make the board more transparent? And have you made that suggestion?
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm scrolling through Iselda's back and forth. So the conversation here, Iselda was between Iselda and Leslie Luther Fulton, who is the executive assistant to the SCA. She ends up speaking for the board a lot. She's the one that's handling the email, I think.
Right.
So the board itself doesn't often reply, or I've never seen a reply from the board. I see often from Leslie, who does a great job, and I will, to her credit, I will give her a lot of kudos for doing this well. I don't always agree with what she says, but she does this well, and she does handle the business of the SCA, I think. So the issue that is brought up here is the idea of transparency, which you just mentioned, and the communications with the board should be more public. So I think and that's maybe, where the idea is that we don't want the investigators' notes. Give us everything else. Give us everything you can give us. And I think, and that's maybe the idea, is that they're not giving us anything versus giving us all the things. There's got to be some sort of middle ground we can reach of public knowledge information, that if we request public knowledge. So there were 4 things that were asked for by Iselda in this. And Iselda, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly in this. I'm guessing based on the spelling. So any and all communications regarding the events, any and all communications regarding the incident reports, any and all communications regarding investigation, and any and all communications between the board of directors and the following individuals. So in that case, out of those 4 items, only one of those is the investigation itself.
And the reports. The investigation reports are part of the investigation.
Okay, but they're also separate, though, because any incident report sent from Gulf Wars is just it. So let's assume there wasn't an investigation. Like I break a leg, and an incident report gets sent from Gulf Wars to.
That's a marshal's incident report. Yep.
Right. That's not an investigation, though, correct?
Probably not.
Is that not? Okay, so then that should be publicly available if someone requests it.
I see what you're asking. So when you said the report, I thought you meant the investigator's report. Sorry.
No. So 4 topics. One of them is any communications regarding the incident report itself. We've seen the incident report because we've seen the one Wistrick sent. Mm-hmm. We can assume it is the one he sent, right? Based on I trust Wistrick. I trust that's what he sent.
We trust Wistrick that he's sending the report that he sent.
So any communications about that report back and forth, any questions about that, had nothing to do with the investigation. Now, the investigation also would have included that. Mm-hmm. But just because it was part of the investigation doesn't make that communication separately over here automatically confidential. That communication is separate from the investigation. And then any communication regarding the events that were not part of the investigation directly. So like if I'm communicating with you as the investigator, I assume that's confidential. Right. If I'm communicating with Billy Joe Marshall over here about this incident, because I was another marshal there, I assume this is not confidential. And that should be publicly available.
So we asked the board of directors for something in a different office.
I think I don't know what all they have access to, and this I will speak to my ignorance on that.
So what I'm getting at is Marshall's reports are not communications with the BOD. Okay, and don't come under the communications with the BOD are public information.
Do they not have? How do I ask this? The Society Earl Marshal
is not a member of the BOD.
Correct. I agree. Falls under Society Seneschal, right?
Who is not a member of the BOD.
Correct. I'll agree with that. Where do they fall in the realm of things? Do they not fall under the direction of the BOD?
So the BOD. Okay. So something that a lot of people aren't familiar with is the BOD. They have game side and world side. Modern side, game side. Sure. And our society officers, our marshals, our seneschals, game side. They deal with the game side issues, things that happen in events, marshals reports, incident reports for Bob broke his leg, whatever. Okay. Cal got on the field and blew raspberries at the Eastern Army, whatever. Okay.
I did do that. That was me. I did that.
It just seemed like you might. So, okay.
All of my Eastern friends out there, no, that tracks, yeah.
So they deal with all of that. Okay. The BOD side deals with, hey, group so-and-so needs to open up a new bank account, such and such insurance requests are being done. We're getting sued for somebody sneezing in the wrong direction. They're dealing with the mundane authorities. They're dealing with the modern issues. Okay. Was there any modern issue associated in any of this? I didn't think there was. Because it's all through the marshalate and up through the Society Seneschal and the investigation, et cetera. All of that is game side.
Mm-hmm.
BOD is dealing with modern side. So you're requesting of this entity information that would have been handled by this entity. So wrong office.
So out of those 4 things, then 2 of them are the wrong office.
Okay.
Right. I'll agree with you there, and maybe that's I want to discuss her response because that's the response I would have given. One of them is the investigation. We ruled that one out. The third one does say any and all communication between the board of directors and the following individuals, and it lists Wistrick, Baldar, Kern, and Gwyneth.
Okay.
So at least one of those in this case is a communication between the board of directors and these people, right?
Right.
So in my opinion, if I was the one responding to this, I would have said, okay, hi, we can't give you what you want. 1 and 2 fall under this office. Please contact X for that request. Yep. 3 is the investigation that is considered confidential. We won't give that to you because of reasons.
Right.
4 is something we should be able to give you because that is communication with the bot. If there was none,
instead of breaking the whole thing down and saying I can't give you any of it.
Yeah, which I think is the failure of the SCA board of directors a lot is they go, nope, not our problem.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with the actual
that's the advice of their lawyers. Okay. For reasons, you'd be amazed at the things that the SCA gets sued out over for stupid shit. You destroyed my dream. Okay. I don't know if you were around for the whole dream one. Yeah.
I was not. From Drush here, so the SCA Society Seneschal was asked point blank for information on a sanction from the person being sanctioned, so from Wistrick in this case, and it was denied because the records were gone. So that is I've seen this very similar.
I
have no response to that specifically, and Drush, if you have that like in writing, I'd love to see it. But I have seen very similar responses to we don't have it, we can't give it to you, whatever, and that's the response we see from in this case the board of directors or the executive assistant is we can't give it to you because we were told not to. I think that's the failing is we don't want. In that idea of transparency, which I'm going to get back to another Drush comment here in a minute about some actionable things. And the idea of transparency is just be more open about the communication with us.
Yeah.
When we ask a question, don't just tell us no. Tell us no and why.
Right.
Right. So if no is the answer, cool. I get it. That may be the answer. In this case, out of the 4 things, one of them is no, 2 of them are wrong office, and one of them is maybe we should have gave it to you if it existed. You know. Okay, so it is on video. And thank you for that, Drush. I have not watched all that video, so I will check on that later.
Right.
So I think,
and in all honesty, I can because I'm sitting here going, well, is the bot saying the investigation is gone because they don't have the notes? Because I know as an investigator, I was required to keep notes, and the Society Seneschal was required to keep those notes. So the Society Seneschal may actually have, those notes. They want us to believe that and remember that they are human. They need to also extend us the same respect. Yeah.
I think this goes to the idea is we want data, something from them other than just no.
Right. So here's the blanket no, probably not the best answer. The no, and here's why. This is because this is considered confidential. This is because you're asking the wrong office. They don't even have what you're looking for. And this is, you know what? Wistrick did write us a letter. Here's a copy of it. You already have it. So it's like, so should they have parsed it instead of treating it as a single piece? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
I am not privy to the conversation in which they decided to deny the whole thing.
Right.
I might have asked to parse it because it's multiple parts of a request, not a single request. I know what they wanted was the investigator's material. I get that. I know why. I completely sympathize with wanting to defend a friend. But the information that comes out might not have been the full story. And here's the stupid thing. At its absolute core for this particular issue, not in all of them, but in this particular issue, it may well have been simply a communication error. It could have been. There could have been no nefarious intent on anybody's part, just a communication error, and everybody got their dander up and dug in their heels. Right. And I liken it unto what I was told as a young officer when I was being taught how to refuse an unlawful order, because believe it or not, officers are taught how to refuse unlawful orders. And he said, you have a duty to refuse an unlawful order. You have an absolute duty to refuse it, but you better be right, because if you're not right, you have refused a lawful order, and that has consequences. Right? So there is that malfunction. Unfortunately, in this case, Wistrick backed up his belief to refuse what he considered was an unlawful order, and he was wrong. It was a lawful order, and that gets him in trouble. There's consequences.
Right. Sure, and I'll be the first to admit when Wistrick fucked up. Like, don't get me wrong, right? And that's a whole different show. So I want to hit a comment here. So members of the board of directors are volunteers. And you're absolutely correct here. They may be erring on the side of caution. You're absolutely correct here. The person we are talking about in his responding to this conversation is the executive assistant for the Society of Creative Anachronism. It is someone who is not a volunteer in this case. There are like 3 people that get paid by the SCA. I think she's one of them. In any case, if she's responding, she should be one of them. I will speak as someone
who's paid by the SCA.
There's like 2 or 3. There's a very small crew that's paid by that actually has.
And they're not the people at the top. No, they're the full-time clerk.
Yeah, which someone who's running a nonprofit. We run this nonprofit poorly. We should pay people more. That's a whole different issue, though. Yeah. We should pay people to actually run this nonprofit versus being volunteers. And I appreciate the board of directors. I appreciate all of our volunteers who do shit. Just hands down. I will disagree with them, but I appreciate them. Those are separate things. So in this case, we're dealing with responses from a singular person who is speaking on behalf of the SCA. Regardless of their volunteer status or their paid status, they are speaking with SCA Incorporated in their title, right? So we are that point, they become the figurehead of the SCA. Right. So regardless of their volunteer status, regardless of who they think they are or who they are, they're speaking as SCA Incorporated.
Sure.
And that's where I've got an issue with that, right? And in this case, they're quoting rules and ignoring rules. And I think we can agree on that they should have parsed it. They should have done better. So there's a couple things here in the comments from others, and thank you for that link, George. I'm assuming that's the Candlemas Q&A. So yeah, idea is giving us reasons, telling us what they can tell us. I think Ducky hits it on the head there. We discussed that. The other thing we want to talk to about is you asked earlier about suggested actionable issues with transparency.
Yeah,
we've done that. So Kevin Rhodes, our Cormac here, has suggested actionable policy, and he was basically told they don't have time.
Like what?
So I don't know. I won't speak to it directly because I don't know. But I know I've seen things from Cormac that he has suggested things.
So the ones that I know about got implemented. Okay. So literally the ones I know about got implemented. There was, once upon a time we didn't hold board meetings in public. We do now.
Right.
Once upon a time we didn't publish minutes. We do now. Once upon a time we didn't rotate where they were.
Admittedly, I've read those minutes. I've read the minutes, and I've been to meetings, and I've read their minutes.
Boring, aren't they?
Well, and they're not actually what was said. They're very small snippets of decisions that were made, but not necessarily did with them. Which I can now appreciate with Zoom. We have recordings of them,
right? Which we didn't at the time.
And I saw a recent conversation about that the board's looking to go back to in-person meetings. Personally, I would prefer they didn't. I'd prefer they not use our travel budget to travel to in-person meetings because I think that's a waste of time. I speak as a remote project manager here. Mm-hmm. Being in a building with people doing Teams meeting is stupid, and that's effectively what they're doing. We all want to see it. There's a bajillion of us in the U.S. that want to see that, and around the known world want to see it. Keep it on Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever their chosen platform is, so we can all see it.
This is new technology. This is while the technology has been there for some time. It's only been in the last 3 years that the general public has embraced this technology.
Correct.
And then you'll get dinosaurs who say, but I don't even have a smartphone. How about me? And well, what do we do to accommodate them?
Right.
We do have an older population. Okay. I don't have a computer. Okay. How do we accommodate them? So there's Every plus has a negative. One of the reasons that they started traveling to each of the different kingdoms was to make it more accessible to people, to make it more accessible to them, so that they could actually attend a board meeting in their area. At one point, we actually had something called a privy council, where we had
still a thing in Kaid, apparently.
Right. Well, it's different. Well, actually, the reference that was made about something that happened in Kaid may have been when the Privy Council still existed, because it was disbanded because it was out of lack of interest, because bod meeting stuff is boring. It really is boring. It's every once and again they have to deal with, hey, I need to R&D this person. Okay, here's the synopsis of the reports associated to all the terrible things that they've done, or hey, this person abused their authority in an office. We need to take some sort of action to make sure they don't do that again. So every once and again, there's one of those. Several times, those will bring up, kerfluffle. With social media, that is more prevalent. The biggest thing, though, and I caution everybody for this, is when you're looking at a series of facts, look at the facts and don't prescribe a motive and then condemn the person for the motive you gave them. And all too often that happens. The board made this decision because they're evil, nepotistic, Star Chamber, Nazi protectors. Okay, well, you just prescribed the motive and you have also condemned them for the motive you gave them, when that's not the case at all. It's an entirely different motive.
Which is easy to do because the board of directors is a nameless, faceless entity. It's easy.
To me, it's not. I know every single person on that board.
So, yeah, same. And I think that's where the disconnect is the board of directors is nameless, faceless, but like, again, Bart, Graf, Ulrich, like I see these people. They have faces. I think that's a problem.
Right.
And I think the flip side is the SCA does often make social media their enemy.
Sometimes.
Right. And that's a thing I think
out of control.
we're in a new world. This is a new known world here that I would love to see more from the SCA. Right. We've seen, I give credit to the social media folks who over the last few years, name is blanking me. She's from Locac. She's a lovely lady. They've done a lot with the SCA social media in those years. I want to see more of that. Right. And I think that plays that transparency idea. Is we see more of those internal things happening that we miss out on because we're not in California. We're not at the KMMS Q&A. Like I can't make these meetings all over the known world. We can if they're virtual. We can if the SCA is more virtual.
So one of the things I've noticed is that the SCA is able to communicate, farther afield. We're able to share information better. We're able to share crafts better. We're able to do the heart of what the SCA does better, and we're connected better because of social media in many places. But it's also a two-edged sword. You get wildfired and wild stipulations, and the rumor mill works 100 times faster with just 10% more, 2% more. Let me add to, and you add to, and now you're no longer actually telling the truth. And people get wrapped up and defensive about their friends, and rightfully so, because we do want to defend people. We do want to defend the marginalized. We do want to make sure that people have a voice. But social media sometimes gets us in trouble because, well, I heard, but that's not what happened. But you've already taken it for fact. And there is study after study after study that says first person to give you a fact pattern is the one you're invested in. That's the truth. Right. All right. And after that, everything else gets, well, they're saying that because they're evil. They're saying that because whatever. And I make up reasons not to listen to the other facts because I've invested in this set of facts. And the more I push aside the other facts, the more I'm investing in the false narrative. Right. So that's a human standard. We as human beings do this. And it is very difficult to unwind that. Well, this was the first fact I heard. Is it the most accurate one? Anyway, and that, so that's why it's important to act more quickly and communicate immediately. Yes, when they can.
Right, but and that's why I think we go back to the idea of volunteers, and that's where it's hard for the SCA to function. Speaking as someone I've been in a social media role, and I've watched these social media people managing kingdom groups when something blows up and they're up till 2 o'clock in the morning and they have to shut a conversation down because they got to go to bed.
Right.
We don't pay people; these are volunteer roles. It's hard, and I think there are more of us now that are doing this sort of thing. Myself and the virtual Herald Jerusha here, trying to get this data out to make this more transparent. Right. I'm not the SCA. I'm not speaking of the SCA, but I can do what I can to add transparency to these issues. But you're right. I think if the SCA wants to control the narrative, they want to be the thing. They got to be the first to get a narrative out there, and
or they
that's
need not.
hard.
And what they've done in the past is simply not said anything because they can't be the first to the gate, and so they shut up and don't say anything.
And that's where I think we all then the rest of us then have to fill in the gaps.
Right.
And that sucks because we're seeing our the God on high over there, the SCA board of directors. I'm just going to keep attributing that. The God on high. I don't either, but like that's right. We see these rulings come down from this omnipotent being over there that we all know is just people we know, but it becomes this omnipotent being. They don't give us any narrative.
So if you want to, they need to get the story out first. Okay. So I can't share the investigative information for legal reasons, for protecting witnesses, for protecting the subject of the investigation, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't share that. Make me a rule for what I can share and what I can't. And that can equally be applied straight across the board. Your worst enemy has to be able to use this rule too. So what rule can I hand Baldar, okay, that he can't use against you?
Okay.
Right, write me that rule.
All right. So I'll put this out here to the folks watching. I think we need that. Let's go through the documents. Let's find the thing.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what we can
Give me the actionable item.
Yeah.
Give us the actionable item to work on.
And I think the first step for me is going to be asking that when a request is made is let's actually do send them to the right people. So in this case, the Society Seneschal should have been contacted, or Society Earl Marshal should have been contacted actually. And the conversations between the board of directors should have been given if they existed. That's where the board of directors screwed up. And again, board of directors, or in this case, the executive assistant screwed up.
I will modify that slightly.
Please.
To say that's where the board of directors may not have communicated enough. I don't know what other factors there are. There could have been, hey, by the way, I'm your paid lawyer who doesn't even dress in funny costumes on weekends. And he doesn't. Okay. Right. He's not an SCA member. Okay. He's literally a paid corporate lawyer. I'm your paid corporate lawyer, and I recommend not doing this because there is a law case before the Supreme Court right now over this very thing. Don't answer it because there's a good chance that X, Y, or Z could happen. That could have been the conversation. Okay, I don't know.
Then tell us that conversation then, right? Because we're looking at the rule.
I will tell you the lawyer first off will tell you, no, you can't. We can't discuss this conversation.
See,
but as I said, I'm totally making that up. Right. Yeah. Okay. I don't know what the other half of that conversation was. So I would modify it as, knowing what I know, I would have said they could have fulfilled part of the request.
Right.
Okay. Maybe. Okay. But I don't know what the other conversation was. I would say that, the individual pieces of the request should have been considered separately. And they addressed one of them, the investigation report. What about the other ones?
Yeah.
They should have addressed those.
And I think they addressed one of them, but without actually addressing one of them. You and I sort of parsed out what they meant in this case. And I think we can
agree that actually flat out specified.
Yes, I mean, that's what they said. There's three other things they didn't hit. And that's,
right. There's three other things I didn't even address. And maybe I would have if I were writing that letter. Okay.
So, and Jerusha, I see your comments there, and you're right. The SCA lawyer isn't doing them any favors in the court of public opinion. They're protecting the SCA Incorporated corporate side, which is unfortunate for us as members, right? We can agree that that's not doing us any favors. It is doing SCA Incorporated favors, right? And I'll say that as a private person here. Yeah. And documented.
Kevin Rhodes' policy suggestion was.
Yeah, that's. I'm going to go back to. She did post it a little further up, and we'll go back and read that. And I'm going to follow up with Cormac about this. It's linked here if anyone wants to go read it. Which Cormac does great writing. I don't always agree with Cormac on some things he has said, but he does some great investigative work. He does some great writing on the SCA and also just on heraldry things too. He's a super good herald. So check out poorhouse.com and his writings. Yeah.
I did read one, and maybe this isn't may or may not be the one that's referencing that We reworked the entire SCA and how we choose administrators and how we choose. If that's the one that was like, well, you're changing the nature of the SCA. There are other groups for that.
Right. And that's where that balance comes in. And that may be that one based on just the title of it there.
Yeah.
And Ducky made another great point of the idea of the investigations in this, and we're going to wrap on this, that we as people need to know more about how this process works. And maybe that's the only thing that'll help. If we know more about the process, like, okay, don't tell me the investigation, but tell me your process. Tell me how this investigation functions. And I will speak as someone who's being investigated currently, by the way.
Oh, so sorry.
I don't, it happens.
Whatever.
When you have opinion of the SCA, you can investigate for stuff. It happens. But it
not right now. I have in the past.
It sucks to not know what's going on. It sucks to not know what's happening and how these investigations function. Right. I think that would help having that class taught to the general public, recorded in some fashion, so we can see what their process is and know that's confidential, even though it's not marked confidential, blah, blah, blah. Those ideas to the general public, which we've covered some of them here. Yay, thank you for that. That would help some. I'm not saying it's going to fix the problem, but it would help.
So let me see if I can't find the link to it. I've had it before. The link to the investigator's manual that basically says, this is how, as an investigator, you go about asking questions. And one of the things they point out is don't prescribe a motive. If somebody tells you something, then go check it. So if the frustrating part is we could have recreated anything that investigator did. Mm-hmm. We could have come up with the exact same facts, but it was more convenient. Can. What's that?
And still can.
And still can. Yeah. But it's more convenient to go read somebody's accounting of it. Well, that's a one-sided accounting. The investigator can't rely on the one document as fact. It's okay. It's a good starting place. Now let's pull the threads. Let's actually look at the details. It sucks that someone else would have to recreate that work, but I don't know of any corporation, nonprofit or otherwise, that publishes investigators' notes. Yeah. And yes, that would be the easiest place to get it. Somebody who said, well, we need to start acting more like a corporation. We are. Right. That's what we're hating about it. That's actually the part we're hating, is because we are acting more like a corporation that has a vested interest in maintaining its staying afloat, not going bankrupt. So.
And this is where we separate the game in the real life. The SCA
game side is modern side.
Yep. Those of us who wear the goofy clothes of the game side and are often the shit into the stick here, at least we feel as much, whereas the corporate side gets protected. Right.
Do you remember how we said your feelings towards something are directly dependent on where you're coming from?
Correct.
When I saw originally what Ristrick wrote, and I was like, holy fuck, that's fucked up. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, and then stop, wait a minute, one side, something's missing.
Yep.
And so I started digging for what was missing, what wasn't in here, because this sounds outrageous.
Right.
And anytime anything sounds outrageous, the first thought you should have is, what am I missing? Right. It's like, where's the other half of the story here? Okay. Even in modern news, when something comes off, oh my goodness, this happened. Okay, what's the other side?
Yeah. There's more to the train wreck than the train wreck.
There's more to this train wreck than the train wreck. Okay. But so we could have recreated all of those pieces had we chose to, but it was easier to read one person's narrative and defend our friend. Mm-hmm. So I don't see, the evil bod, because I know every person on that board.
Right.
I've probably had a drink with every person on that board, and anyone who knows me knows I don't drink that much. So it's like, it's like, what's in that mug?
It's a Washington apple with Sprite, and it's lovely. Thank you very much.
But it's a natural thing. Yeah. Because we want to defend our friends. And that is a good thing.
There you go. All right. We're just at an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and do some show plugs. And I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation. This series, I plan to continue until the SCA doesn't have problems.
Good luck.
Which will be literally never. Yeah.
I've been here 40 plus years. It's always had problems. Yep. Always. I mean,
and you know what?
Kingdom number 4. Okay, do you know what they called the crowning of Kingdom number 4 was?
The Aiden Heresy.
the Aiden heresy.
Yeah, right. As a member of that line of succession.
Yeah. 3.
Yep.
Maybe even before.
Speaking of amazing people, so coming up this Sunday on Kal-bardr's Corner, Excellency Remote will come back out of the hospital finally, and we'll be joined by Sir Brialthan de Reims for another walk down the road to retention. That is 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on 3/26. That is this Sunday. Next Sunday, I'll be joined by one of our folks in the comments today, the Honorable Lady Jerusha, to talk about the idea of the virtual heralding, or in this case, can't stop the signal. We're going to have this is going to be a spicy one, folks. Her and I are going to have some chats. So she's been doing virtual heraldry since before virtual heraldry existed. She started it. She is the predecessor of virtual heraldry. And I want to talk to her about why and what she's doing and sort of plans that she's got and maybe some new shows she has planned. She might have talked to me about that. There might be some thoughts in her brain. So tune in for that next Sunday at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. If you want to support Kal-bardr's Corner, SCA Coaches Corner, Ask the Knights Live, and all the other shows we sponsor and produce here on KK Productions, look us up on Patreon, patreon.com/KK Productions, and join the grand wall of patrons. Also can find us on Redbubble searching KK Productions.
Good job.
There you go. All the things. Your Grace, this has been a pleasure. I want to thank you for just being open and honest, right? And providing some detail from this as an investigator, as someone who has enough words, enough alphabet soup behind her name to choke someone. You sent me your full name and title, and I was like, good God, I don't have enough space on the banner for that one.
No, we don't. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not offended.
But I think it's interesting to get the perspectives, right? I think I may not always agree with everything that you've said or others say.
That's fine.
But I think this is important to have these conversations, and I hope more of these will come up. So thank you for this.
I appreciate your forthrightness. I appreciate your professionalism in this. And I want to thank you once again for actually doing these, because changes are made by the people who show up. Changes are made by the people who provide actionable things that can be done, not just, I hate this. Great, I hate it too. Now what?
Right.
Okay. So thank you for helping create a forum where an actionable item can be put forward. And then we have to discuss those actionable items.
Right.
What can we do to make the SCA more transparent? And if the answer is change the SCA completely, that might take a while. But if it's an actionable item that we can get to, by God, let's advocate for that. Change is made by those who show up, and not show up and scream, but show up and do exactly like you're doing. And I appreciate you doing it, because it's not easy. And
You're
moderating
correct.
isn't easy either.
Yeah.
Having done my fair share of moderating, that's not easy either.
I think you're absolutely right there. And so it's folks out there, if you've got thoughts, if you have ideas, if you have an actual thing that maybe you don't feel comfortable expressing or don't know how to word, bring it to us. I myself have a platform here, but also have a ton of friends that have thoughts. Happy to connect you. Happy to put people together to make some things happen. And sometimes it just takes enough of us talking about it. So
Yep.
Reach out either through Kal-bardr's Corner on Facebook or email kal-bardr.geiler. I'll put that in the chat as well. So
Good deal.
But until next time, folks, I want to thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you all Sunday and every other Sunday here on Kal-bardr's Corner. For now, this has been Her Grace and Kal-bardr and Kal-bardr's Corner. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.